Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from the oh-so-beautiful neighborhood of Reedville, in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts, in the shadow of the Great Blue Hills. We are so honored and so wicked happy that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. How do we do that? Well, we do it by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. Please be sure to join us in this mission by telling your family and friends about the show. Let your kids' teachers know about it, their librarian, their principal, and let them all know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, Podcast Addict, Good Pods, wherever you find your favorite shows. Today we have two amazing guests. Crystal Foote will be here to celebrate the Inclusivity Superheroes. And later on in the show, Christine Coe will be here to celebrate Sound Switch Wonder. Hey, are you ready to ignite a passion for reading in your students? Introducing bookandauthor.com, your gateway to literacy connections. With bookandauthor.com, connecting your school with talented authors of captivating kids' books has never been easier. Simply visit our user-friendly website and explore our extensive database of authors. Filter your search based on budget, genre, and availability. Discover the perfect match for your school and your students. But that's not all. With bookandauthor.com, you have the power to request a proposal. Let vetted authors come to you with their tailored ideas, ensuring an unforgettable literacy experience for your students. Don't wait any longer to inspire young minds through the magic of books. Visit bookandauthor.com today and open the door to a world of literacy connections. Bookandauthor.com, where literacy comes to life. Joining us right now from the great and beautiful city of Atlanta, our guest is here today to celebrate. Her new children's book is called The Inclusivity Superheroes. Please welcome to the show, Crystal Foote. Hey, Crystal, how are you?
Great, Jed. Thanks for having me. Happy Friday.
I am delighted to have you on. I am so excited to talk to you about inclusivity. This is, inclusion is an issue that has been a passion of mine since before it was cool.
Same for me. Always. My family is actually so diverse that I didn't realize it was an issue until I became an adult.
You know, you're right. I remember this is going to sound so silly, but we were considered a mixed family when I was growing up because my mom was Catholic and my dad's family was, some of them were Episcopal and some of them were Catholic. In other words, some of them were Catholic light and some were Catholic. But it was, that was an issue. And people were like, how can you get along? And I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
I can top that.
Okay.
So my mom's dad is Jewish and my mom's mom is African-American Methodist.
Yeah. Now that's a mixed family. But isn't it great that we can sit back and laugh at that right now and how silly it is?
Yeah, we can, but other people might not, you know, unfortunately.
Yeah. So tell us about the Inclusivity Superheroes, please.
Yes, so the Inclusivity Superheroes, A Tale of Diversity and Unity, is a children's book that I wrote really to help children as well as adults understand the importance of inclusivity, diversity, and unity. So I decided, you know, what's the easiest way to really communicate how important this is in our lives? And I say it's kind of hard to change a 20-year-old mind who already has their mind made up that maybe this is not for them, that maybe this is not something they want to accept in their lives. It's really hard to convince someone maybe in their 50s or 60s about this if they don't understand, what the importance is of inclusivity. So I said, let me start with children, because with this book, with a child understanding these foundational concepts, it's easier for them to understand the power behind inclusivity and unity. So that way, when they get older, they're more accepting of diversity in their lives.
Yeah. I've told the story before on the podcast, but it's such a great story. I love to share it. My experience with inclusivity started, beyond my family, but it started back in the late 80s when I was working at a school for kids with severe developmental disabilities. And my job, because I'm a professional clown and have a big mouth, my job was to create opportunities for these kids to get out and interact with quote-unquote typical kids. And it was a wonderful program. It was hugely successful, despite all the people who were trying to make it fail. I was working with kids who, most of them couldn't walk, they couldn't talk, they couldn't really do anything for themselves, but we were able to demonstrate that they could become great friends with typical kids. And one of the ways we did it was by bringing these kids into a typical public school, letting them develop relationships. And the one girl that I work with, the one girl that was able to walk by herself, actually was the person that introduced me to my beautiful wife.
Oh, wow.
I love that. She knew that I was smitten by this woman. This teacher were walking in the hallways and I'd see her and I'm like, oh, wow, she's really cute. And this girl would just giggle because she knew I wouldn't go up. And she wandered off one day and went up to the teacher, and that forced me to go and start having a conversation. And next thing you know, we were getting married.
I love that. But see, that's an example of how we can learn so much from people of all backgrounds, and we never know, the commonalities that we can learn from one another, but also how we can help each other out, Yeah. And look at, you found your wife because of this scenario.
Yeah, no, it was, it was wonderful, and I'm so excited, and I love to share that just for that reason. It's like, yes, you have no idea what blessings a person can bring into your life when you're open up to having relationships with everyone you meet.
That's right. 100% agree with that.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the neat characters we're going to meet in your book.
Yes. So the first character is Emma, and Emma's amazing at weaving illusions together. So you can really see what is happening in her mind, but in front of you. So she's weaving all these characters and scenarios and really illustrating her story, but with visuals. Then we have Carlos, and Carlos is incredible because he can go really back in time if he wanted to, or to the future. So he's more of a time bender. And he likes to run away from dinosaurs in one moment and then, look at the latest tech inventions in the future at another moment. And then we have Aisha, and Aisha is a telekinetic where she can take objects and move them with her mind and create sculptures or create, buildings or whatever she wants to move with her telekinetic powers.
So cool. That is really, really cool. And I think it's perfect because I think it opens up kids. Kids love superheroes. They really spark kids' imagination. And when we get kids' imagination kind of working, I think it's really easy to then help them imagine what it will be like becoming friends with the kids in their school that are different than them.
Jed, 100% correct. So I decided to build these characters based on superheroes because I feel like that was a very universal metaphor of people coming from different backgrounds, but all of us really enjoying the different abilities that each of us can have as a superhero, or that others, that we watch on the big screen have as superheroes. We're fascinated by that. So we should be fascinated by people's different backgrounds as well because it brings so much value and happiness in our lives. So I'm going to ask you a question. Okay. If you were a superhero, which superpower would you have?
Wow. Boy, the idea of flying, when I have those dreams when you're flying, and because I'm terrified of heights, but those are really wonderful dreams. So maybe flying. I'd like to think that being able to make friends with people is a pretty cool superpower too.
I love that. Yeah, definitely. I love that. If I were to pick one, I go between so many. But today I'm feeling like teleporting. So, if I had that ability, I can get out of this dreary weather right now that we have in Atlanta and go to the Caribbean islands and have fun with my family on the beach and immerse in different cultures, in different countries as well. So I would pick that.
That would be, I really used to love the idea of teleportation because I was a big Star Trek fan and Star Trek Next Generation. We had LeVar Burton on the show, and I really wanted to do that until I saw an episode where they explained like how it happens and like you're destroyed and then you're put back together and I'm like, I don't think I want to do that.
Well, if you didn't have your body destroyed in the process,
then absolutely, yes.
Okay, good.
I do love that because one of the things as a kid growing up, I didn't have a lot of money to travel, to get on airplanes and travel internationally. And then we got married, we had kids, and we were investing in their education. We did a lot of traveling around the States, and certainly in my job, I did a lot of traveling within the States. But it wasn't until my kids got out of high school that my beautiful wife and I started traveling. And I know Americans have this rap that, they don't travel. And I guess half of Americans don't have their passport. And I think part of it is that when you're traveling, you really have to become vulnerable. You have to be willing to be vulnerable. And I think the same is true when we're meeting people who are different than us. You have to have that courage to kind of be vulnerable and not be in control of everything. I think it's a beautiful thing. I mean, I just love I came back, I toured El Salvador with a group called Clowns Without Borders in November, and I was the only one in my troupe that wasn't fluent in Spanish. But it was great because I had to depend on people, and I was never let down.
Right. And you learned so much, too. You probably learned a couple of words that you didn't know before.
I did, and they're really powerful, bad words, but I can't say on the podcast.
That is hilarious.
Yeah. But, I'm so happy that we're talking about this book and this movement that you're creating, because I really think it's a gift that we give to our kids when we have them have open minds and be open to friendships with people, with all people. But I have to share something with you. I mentioned on the podcast, I'm almost 100 years old. I remember hearing Dr. King the day that he made his famous I Had a Dream speech on the news and talking to my dad about it and how cool that would be. And I've seen a lot of progress, but I also have seen there are people who seem to want to take us back to where we need separate this and separate that, and that gets me discouraged sometimes.
It's disappointing. It really is. But I do believe in our country and that we'll make the right decision. I pray for it every day, especially as a mom, right? I don't want to see us go back to a time where things were separate and, not integrated, because we've seen the beauty of when we are all working together. We went through a horrible time in the world during the pandemic. And at a time, that pandemic was not discriminatory, right? It took out whoever it wanted to based on anything. Didn't matter who you were, didn't matter how much money you had. For the most part, everyone caught the virus, and some people didn't survive that. But we came together as a world, as a country, to make sure that we were okay, checking on our neighbors, getting supplies and food, giving medical devices and kits out for people who needed it. We came together, giving out masks sewing. I remember companies were created just to sew masks for people who needed it. Spirit industry, they turned, some of their inventory into hand sanitizers. So we came together and that was beautiful. And I would like to continue seeing that because at the end of the day, you don't want to go backwards because if you go backwards, it is a fail for our country. We cannot create new things. We cannot move forward being a powerful country if we resort to things that don't bring us together as one.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And I think we forget this is a beautiful country. And I believe that it's certainly not a perfect country. And there's a lot that we can do to make it more perfect. And I think that's the neat thing about the country because it was kind of founded with the idea of creating a more perfect union. And I think that overall we've really helped make the world a better place. Again, not perfect, but I think that our country has been a force of good and positivity in the world. And let me climb down off my soapbox right now.
But even just that point, if you look at strictly data and stats and research, you'll see that the most lucrative companies have a very diverse type of organization structure, right? It's not homogenous. You don't only see one type of person at that company. And when you do, typically revenue is down year over year. There is lack of innovation. There is lack of market share because they don't know how to compete or to reach out to new customers because their, internal departments are not representing the people they want to reach. So they don't know how to speak to them, communicate, how to be authentic. And so they're losing money every day, right? So just on that alone tells you how beautiful diversity and inclusivity is.
Yeah. Oh, just here on the podcast, I sit down. I have these incredible interns from Emerson College working with me, and they're very respectful. And I think they sit down and going, "Oh, I'm just here to learn. I can't speak up and offer ideas." And I'm like, "Team, I'm almost 100 years old. I don't know this social media stuff. This is, there's
right.
Lots of young moms who are listening to the show. I can't relate to, you got to help me out here." And it just adds to the power and the beauty of the show, I think.
I agree.
Yeah. Speaking of shows, I need to talk about this. You were part of a real hit show. You were part of Below Deck Mediterranean, a show that millions of folks love. First off, what was you got to tell us the episode that you were part of?
Yes, I was on Below Deck Mediterranean Season 5, Episodes 9 and 10. And our episode actually aired during the pandemic in 2020. So we filmed it in 2019 and it aired in 2020. So of course we had no idea that everyone would be home watching this particular show because it really had nothing else to do. No one was out and about.
Uh-huh. Yeah. That's I got to the end of Netflix during the pandemic.
Right. Same. I was like, there's nothing else on here.
And now you were sharing with me before, that was the episode that Kiko got fired because he made nachos. Did I get that right?
Yes. So that show was incredible for so many reasons. So we were coined as the best charter of all time for Below Deck Mediterranean. Also, we were the most diverse, too. So I don't know, maybe, they had something going on there with being a diverse cast and being the best charter of all time. But also, we had some issues with one episode where Kiko, loved Kiko so much, he made his version of nachos. And I'm from California originally, so I like my nachos in a certain way. I like to say very authentic. And it was not what we were expecting or what the viewers were expecting either, or what Captain Sandy was expecting. It was simply just tortilla, chips and cheese on top that was scorched with like a little flame thing scorcher. And that was it. So, That was interesting, but he didn't get kicked off just because of those nachos, but those nachos were probably the cherry on top.
Okay. Well, even this old Irish white guy from Boston knows that ain't nachos.
Right. Right. I feel like nachos really haunts that show. There was another chef that got kicked off, and she will forever be recognized as, the chef that made also burnt nachos. Maybe I should go on there and show them. Actually, on the Inclusivity Superheroes website, the inclusivitysuperheroes.com, we have a recipe for nachos on there.
Awesome. And it's more than just burnt cheese. All right. Hey, one of the things that I love to talk about when I have the opportunity, I created the Reading with Your Kids podcast because I know that my relationship with my now adult kids, and it's a great relationship, was built on the foundation that was created when we were reading with them. And reading with the kids was allowed us to have conversations and conversations about the books, and that led to conversations about the TV that we were watching and the music that we were watching. And it led, like in my son's case, who was a big pro wrestling fan, it led me to be able to talk to him about the fact that, hey, this is staged. They don't really hate each other. They're not, they're getting hurt sometimes, but when they get hurt, it's by accident. And and with my daughter talking about reality shows, she was a big ghost hunter fan, and I'm like, yeah, we never are going to find the ghost, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the fact that quote unquote reality shows aren't totally real, and you can talk. There's a lot of staging that goes on and manipulation in post-production. Could you talk a little bit about that, please?
I can. What's interesting is that Below Deck Mediterranean was actually not staged. It was real.
Okay.
Out of all of the other shows that are on air, that is one that is very authentic because of the scenario that we're in, right? We are on a boat in water. Something is bound to happen. Then the cast, they're from all different countries and backgrounds. Something's going to happen. And then you have guests coming every 3 to 4 days, and you're trying to make sure that you can provide a level of customer service to this new guest in a very fast turnaround. And then you're going to bring on some other guests after that. So that scenario is like a perfect storm for reality TV, where it doesn't need any scripting or any staging because something is bound to happen, right? But for other shows that rely on that because, they're not as different in terms of, they're not on a boat in water with different casts every week or different guests every week. That is created really to make sure that viewership is up, and that they can get advertisers to pay for the production and to pay for the cast and the crew on the show. And also to create a sense of escapism for people who really don't have that type of life, who kind of, live a normal standard life, who need something creative or need some inspiration or need to maybe get some drama as well because they don't have that in their day to day. So I like to say reality TV is really like the new age soap opera, it's very similar to that because remember the soap operas, they're still airing on today. It was different scenarios. They have a cast. There's always drama and then the suspenseful music. Tune in next week to see what happens. Yeah. So, it's just a new form of entertainment that has really picked up a lot in today's world.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm glad you shared that because I think, again, it's like helping our kids become media literate, financially literate, being able to read literate, literate. I think it's so important, and it's our job as parents because we are our kids' first and most important teachers.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. And they learn so much from us. So, yes, they'll have some screen time, but it's just as important to have, if not the same, more time where they're off the screen and they're getting real world experiences with their parents They're reading books with their parents to have those conversations, to your point, Jed. In the Inclusivity Superheroes, we have a section in the back for grown-ups to continue conversations with their children, to talk to them about why inclusivity is important, why diversity is important. And then hopefully with that, the grown-ups also understand as well, and they're learning as they're reading the different points that we provide them.
Yeah. Are you hoping that the Inclusivity Superheroes becomes a series of books and maybe an animated series or maybe a movie?
I would love that. I would love that so much. When I got done with the first book, I was like, oh, thank you. This was an amazing experience. We got through it, our first book. And then my daughter the same day was like, okay, so when's the second book coming out? Like, when are you going to start working on that? I'm like, oh my gosh, can I breathe? So she is definitely my cheerleader. She encourages me to be the best human being in the world. And we're going to make a second book. I would love to have an animated series, 100%. Just finding the right talent to do that because I want to make sure that I convey the characters in the most appropriate light and everything from hair texture to clothes and culture. So it takes a lot, you're right, but I want to make sure it's meaningful and it's not rushed and it's authentic.
Yeah. Here's an idea. This is what I see. Okay, superheroes below deck. And, so they just decided they're going to go on vacation. They're going to go on this boat and
I love it.
Kiko is making superhero nachos that are a little bit better than the ones he made for you.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
And that's one of the superpowers. You could have a new character who has a superpower of making nachos that are perfect.
Sounds good.
Hey, please remind everybody where they can go to find out more about the Inclusivity Superheroes and find out more about you.
Yes, so to find the Inclusivity Superheroes, a tale of diversity and unity, you can purchase it on Amazon. You can also check out our website, theinclusivitysuperheroes.com. Purchase it there. And we also have some interactive elements on the website too. So check it out, like recipes and coloring activities. You can find me on LinkedIn at Crystal Foote.
Awesome. And, I would love, I want to challenge folks who are listening. Go get that recipe for the nachos. Create the nachos. Take a picture of you and your kids and tag Crystal so she can see them. And then we can show Nico how to really make some bomb nachos. Kiko.
I think you combined nachos and Kiko together.
I did. Well, he doesn't deserve full credit until he learns how to make the nachos. So.
We love you, Kiko.
We've had a great time speaking. That's right. We should include bad chefs in our lives. We just need to include everybody.
That's right. They learn.
There you go. We've had a great time speaking to the author of the Inclusivity Superheroes. Our guest has been Crystal Foote. Crystal, this has been a blast. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Jed. I appreciate it.
Before we invite our guest into the studio, I would love to invite you to visit a very special website. It's clownswithoutborders.org. Clownswithoutborders.org. This is a group that I absolutely adore. I am part of Clowns Without Borders, and I had the honor of being part of the 2023 tour of El Salvador. I had so much fun joining with artists from all over the world to bring a smile to people who really needed it and really appreciated it too. And we would love for you to join us as a monthly Joy Maker. The Joy Makers, they're a family of people just like you who love to laugh and make other people feel good. So please take a moment and visit clownswithoutborders.org and consider joining me as a Joy Maker. Join us right now from the beautiful state of Connecticut. We could actually get together and have a cup of coffee right after this. Our guest is here today to celebrate a book that she co-wrote with her 13-year-old son. It's called Sound Switch Wonder. Please welcome to the show, Dr. Christine Coe. Hey, Dr. Christine, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me, Jed.
I'm delighted to have you on. This sounds like a fascinating book. The title is really attention-getting. Tell us about what Sound Switch Wonder is all about, please.
Down Switch Wonder is a picture book that has a main character with cochlear implants. That's one thing, one major thing. And I wanted to kind of get out there through a picture book, so through pictures, what cochlear implants really look like. Because even as a physician, honestly, I didn't know what they looked like. And when my son has cochlear implants as well. And when my son and I, when he was younger and we would be walking around, especially non-New Haven cities, people would comment on them and say there were two main things they would say. One, they would assume that it was some sort of Bluetooth device that, he was two.
I want one of those. I want one of those.
Yeah. They'd be like, oh, and so sometimes it would be a little like, kind of like, oh, like your child has Bluetooth devices on, kind of as if it was cute, not judgmental, but okay, that's cute. But sometimes you'd be judgmental, like, why does your child, kind of like, oh, Bluetooth devices on your 2-year-old? It's kind of like, yeah, why would I put Bluetooth devices on my 2-year-old? All the way to, in New York City, there was, someone who started yelling at me on the street, like, get those off your child. What are you doing to him? Like, he needs to, like, not have those on his head. And, just, complete stranger just yelling at us. And so, it was interesting that, I just thought, okay, so that was one thing I wanted. And at that time I was looking for books that he could see himself mirrored, which I've heard you talk about on this show, which I think is so important. And there were some books, but mainly they were, about the surgery experience, so sort of like what our family, my son did go through, like, oh, I'm diagnosed with hearing impairment. And so I need to go to the doctor, and then, oh, I need surgery, etc. So that kind of experience. And I just wanted it to be a story. Mm-hmm. And so then the other thing I wanted to do was try to show that no sound can be beautiful.
Mm. That's something when I was reading on the website that I want to talk about. But before I do, I certainly can relate to your experience. The people who listen to the podcast know that I had an accident that required surgery, and so as part of the recovery, I moved from a wheelchair into a walker, and then into these $6 million man bionic looking braces on both of my legs. And I know I would go into a restaurant, and I people were like, what is that? What is that coming towards me? And being an old man, I just kind of knew it, and it's like, yeah, look at these. He's a weird, aren't they? But I imagine it, that's a little bit more challenging for a kid to have people stare at you and look at you like, oh, what's that stuff? And certainly having somebody yell at you, and having someone yell at you in New York City isn't all that unusual. Right. But it's certainly uncomfortable. And, if your son was older, I'm sure it would have been very uncomfortable for him.
Well, I think you have a really good point. I have listened to your podcast. I did know that about your accident and the wheelchair. I didn't know about the bionic looking, legs for a while. And I think that even just spending a little time with you right now online, I realize you seem, and I heard, that you do, you're a clown as well. I think maybe you have much more than me, I'm assuming, a comfort level with being noticed, like being in the spotlight. And honestly, I think that's something that I really had to learn to be okay with, through being with my son and wanting to model once he's older, because I figured, hopefully, right, all parents, I think, we think, knock on wood, our children don't remember exactly what happens from like birthday all the way, to maybe like age 3 at least, because we make a lot of mistakes without intending to. And And I will say I was very uncomfortable. I think you hit the nail on the head with people staring at us. And my son also, since he didn't have language, he couldn't hear enough to develop language. So at age 2, he was still making sounds that weren't language. And so people would stare at us if we would go places because he didn't, the sounds he was making were not words. Mm-hmm. And so, I didn't want to ever have him feel that I was ashamed of him or that I was embarrassed, and so it was sort of, it was a real learning experience for me because I'm shy and I'm an introvert and I don't like to be in the spotlight. I don't really want attention on me ever. And people do look at what's different from them. And I don't think that's necessarily wrong. Mm-hmm. The book Wonder, which I love, that book was, R.J. Palacio says she wrote that book because her child was sort of staring at someone with a craniofacial difference. And she was like, no, like, turn away. Like, we don't want to do that. And then she realized that also while staring is maybe not ideal, also to just sort of turn away and ignore what's different from us is also not really ideal either. And so I came to appreciate more that staring at least is like, okay, maybe it's a little bit closer to curiosity than turning away, where then you really can't learn. So this picture book was also an attempt to be like, to have that mirror experience for someone else maybe who has cochlear implants and reads the book, but also for people to realize it's okay. Like, it's okay to ask. It's okay, to see it, and just also hopefully maybe they just will recognize it now and not have to ask what it is.
Right. Yeah, and thank you for noticing. Thank you for listening to the podcast. We do celebrate the fact that books can be mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And as an old white guy who grew up with lots of books that had people looking like, well, not looking like me, they mostly had hair, but with people, I saw myself represented. So I didn't understand how important that mirror aspect was until recently. When I had a conversation with Naomi Schaefer, who was a boss clown of Clowns Without Borders, and she was talking about reading books about clown families, and I realized I used to do that with my kids. And yeah, that was real. I didn't realize we were looking at a mirror at that point. But I digress. But I really think it's important for kids for books to serve as windows so that we can. So yes, there are a lot of parents who don't know what those bionic looking leg things are or that little Bluetooth thing in the head. And I'm a little bit too shy to go up and ask him. Maybe it would be rude, but maybe if I can sit down and read a book with my kids and I can learn and we can have a conversation. And then the next time that we see somebody with some walking aids or some hearing aids or from a different culture, then we can maybe sit down and have a conversation, or we can look and say, oh yeah, that's a cochlear implant, and that allows that person to hear and communicate.
Yes, totally. Yeah. Exactly.
Hey, we're talking here, I'm familiar with cochlear implants. Obviously you are. And I think, 9 minutes into this, we've been talking like we assume that everybody else out there knows what they are. So can you give us a little kind of basic rundown about cochlear implants and how they're different than typical hearing aids and how they work?
Yeah, cochlear implants, that's the other thing. Some people think they're just hearing aids, and they're not. So cochlear implants, actually, there's a part of the implant that's implanted. That's why it's called an implant in the person. Adults have them too in the person's head. Hearing aids, they're like eyeglasses. You take them on and off. Now, similarly, hearing aids and cochlear implants are both electronics, right? So like your phone, like you don't want it dropped in water, etc. You have to protect it from rain. So it's a little bit of a pain in that sense. So there are some parallels. But hearing aids, a major difference is hearing aids just amplify sound. So they make sound louder. Cochlear implants actually take sound and manipulate it through a little computer that's part of the cochlear implant and helps process that sound to kind of like the way telephones do, if you imagine telephones or radio stations, radio waves and sending sound over, wires. The cochlear implant does that. So it takes sound from the environment and then translates that. And then that is sent, stimulated to nerves in the person's head. And then the person's brain then interprets those signals, then as sound. And so it's really, I think, like a medical miracle. And when you read about the development of cochlear implants, it's just amazing because people really said this is impossible to recreate. It's actually recreating a sense. And I will also say that I think it's important for me to say this because there's also the capital D deaf community that for a long time, and maybe less so now, but still maybe a little bit now, was against cochlear implants. And the reason for that is because the capital D deaf community considers deafness to not be any sort of disability at all. And at the height of the controversy, considered parents like me, someone with typical hearing who has a child who is deaf. And that actually, as a statistic, that happens 90% of the time, actually, deaf children are born into, families with typical hearing, with no one else deaf, and that's like our family. And the controversy is that, if you correct deafness, then maybe you're sort of wiping deafness away from the world. And that's not my intent. It wasn't my intent. And I understand that sort of feeling of being against it. But I also think that when the capital D deaf community, they primarily communicate through signed language. So in the U.S., it's American Sign Language. And you'll hear stories about that the capital D deaf community, when to deaf parents who use sign language to communicate, if they have a child who is also deaf, they celebrate, like, meaning that it's not a disability. But I think they celebrate because it's sort of like, oh, you are the same as me. Your vertical identity is the same. I'm deaf, you're deaf. We are going to have the same language. And I think that language is a huge part of identity oftentimes. And that's what the deaf community with the capital D was against, that I'm trying to change my son's identity. And what I would say is I was never trying to change his identity. And I'm not trying to wipe deafness away from the world. My son is still deaf. And I tell him that he is, because as soon as he takes the cochlear implants off, or if they lose power, he cannot hear. And so, but I think what I want to emphasize is that we wanted to be able to communicate with him, and we don't know any sort of sign language. And so while the most important thing, and I recognize that, is for a child to get exposure to a language, when the capital D deaf community says that a parent like me is depriving my child of sign language, by trying to have him have a spoken language, and the problem is the only language I know is spoken language. So how would I, as his mom, be able to communicate with him primarily in sign language? I can try to learn it, but then I feel like that's dumbing down the true language that, say, American Sign Language or other sign languages are. I can't learn it in a month, and communicate with my child. So then actually, there was a little bit of time where they thought that someone like me should actually give my child up for adoption to, a capital D deaf family or something like that. And I was like, but this is my child. And I've thought about this a lot, and I don't have the right thing to say about it, I don't think. But I just want to say that this wasn't about trying to change my son's identity. It was really about communication when we chose to give him the cochlear implants. And today he's happy he has them. So I'm glad, and I don't force him to wear them. He does not actually wear them all the time. So, and we're trying to slowly learn sign language. So there's a lot of nuance to the whole cochlear implant story. And so when I say it's a medical miracle, I don't want people to come away with thinking that, oh, all deaf people, all they need to do is get a cochlear implant. Because I think that is also sort of an ableist view that I don't actually endorse, and I don't want to come across as seeming to say that with either the picture book or with this podcast.
Yeah. Well, as I'm sitting here speaking to you, and I have the advantage of being able to see you, and what's very clear to me is that you have a deep, deep love for your son. And what's also very clear to me is that you have an equally deep respect, not only for people in the deaf community, but for all people. And you have gone out of your way to be inclusive and to kind of celebrate their feelings and be respectful of their feelings. So, and I think that's the best we can do, because we're human and we can't get inside somebody else's head. We can barely walk in somebody else's shoes, but we certainly can't get inside their head and their feelings. And one of the things that you said early on that I wanted to go back to touch on, and you just kind of mentioned it, is your son has the ability to shut off the cochlear implants and to get into that world of silence. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you think that that's an advantage for him?
Yeah. So, I think that I in this way, I really do think that capital D deaf community is right. That hearing people, we are losing out by not being able to go into true silence. So my son, even when he was younger and he'd be angry with me, so he has bilateral cochlear implants, meaning he has them on both sides. And so there's a magnet part where literally he does have a magnet, one side of the magnet's implanted underneath his skin, and then part of the cochlear implant, there's just an external magnet then that sort of just, magnetizes and just snaps kind of, onto the magnet that's underneath his skin. So that magnet needs to be, on, the magnets need to be on his head. As soon as he pops that magnet, either, both of them off, if one side is on, he still hears from that one side. But if he pops both of the magnets off his head, he can't hear. And so he knew, right? It's like kids are smart. He knew this from, when he's 2 and he gets them. And as soon as he knew he'd be in trouble, or if he would see my face and think, uh-oh, I don't want to hear what she's about to say, he would just flick those magnets off his head. Yeah, he does it to this day. He sees my face. He just takes them off. Now he'll just take them off and put them, on the table. And, sometimes if he's angry with me too, he'll look at me and be like, what are you going to do now? kind of thing. Or if he's just trying to, act like, I'm just going into my silent mode. He just looks down. So, he'll do that. But so that's sort of, kind of a funny thing that we have between us. But really I don't know what it's like. So I just know from him. And, but he's always, even from when he was younger, I realized it seemed very peaceful for him. When he was, a toddler, I couldn't really, he probably didn't really have the words to really transmit. And I think for a long time, he didn't really, kids when they're kids, they don't really know that they're adults, this is true for adults too. Mm. We don't really recognize how different our own experience is from the person next to us, right? Mm-hmm. So I think he thought that I should know, what it's like. And why am I asking him? Yeah. So But now he's 13, and especially I think the process of writing the book together, we talked about it now and again, and he just says it's peaceful, and it's hard for him to describe. I don't know that it's something that is really describable.
Right. I'm thinking, I'm trying to make a comparison. I'm like, I have these noise canceling headphones, and I love putting them on because, especially on an airplane, it really is quiet, but it's not silent. And so we don't know. And so that's, we've talked here. We had Mia Armstrong on, who is a 12-year-old with Down syndrome. And she was like, Down syndrome is my superpower. And we've had people with dyslexia say similar things. And I actually think that's a really healthy attitude to take. And it sounds like that's something that your son appreciates, is that he can go into this world of silence that so many of us try to attain through meditation and yoga and breath work and whatnot. So who are we to judge? I think let's stop judging and just hang out together, get to know each other, and love each other.
I agree. I think to stay curious, I think, is one of the most important things.
I like that. Stay curious. That's a great prescription. And you're a doctor, so we should listen to you. So, hey, listen, Christine, where can we go to find out more about Sound Switch Wonder, find out more about you, and find out more about your son? He's a very handsome young man.
Oh, thanks. Well, the book has a website. It's just soundswitchwonder.com. It's also on Amazon. It's in some bookstores. It's on, Goodreads and whatever. I have my own website. It's christinejco.com. That has some more information if you want.
We've had a really great time speaking to the co-author of Sound Switch Wonder. She wrote this book with her son, Owen. Our guest has been Dr. Christine Coe. Hey, Dr. Christine, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Jed. I really enjoyed it.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. Hey, please be sure to connect with us on social media. We love connecting with our listeners on social media. Facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram and TikTok, at Jedley Magic on Twitter. And please be sure to subscribe to our Reading With Your Kids channel over on YouTube. Right now, that is the place where you can find the Reading With Your Kids show. You can listen to all the episodes of the show that are up there. And you can also find our 2 spin-off projects, Drawing with Your Kids, a great way to bond with your kids, sitting down, learning how to draw characters from some of the great books that we've celebrated here on the show, and you can be learning from those illustrators. It's a really, really fun show. And STEM is family fun. It's a great short series of short videos that teach you and your kids how to do different STEM activities at home using things that you find in most homes. We've collaborated with the San Diego Children's Discovery Museum, with Children's Museum Houston, with the National Children's Museum, and some great authors. Check it all out. It's at our Reading With Your Kids page on YouTube, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids. We'd also love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Check out our blog, download our free online magazine, visit our certified Great Read Wall of Fame, and you can use the contact button up at the top of the page to send us a message. Let us know what you love about the show. Let us know what we could be doing better. And let us know who you would like to hear on a future episode of the show. And if you're an author, please be sure to click the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page to find out how you can be a guest here on Reading With Your Kids. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we're going to start by thanking our amazing guests and sponsors. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Chris Doherty, Skylar Strauss, Nick Warner, Kyoko Ito, Kaylin Newland, Kristen Barrett, Sydney Swan, Hannah Rose. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all of her support. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you for taking the time to join us today, and thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by Reading With Your Kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading With Your Kids.